problems. I want to remind everyone that Southington does offer a sidewalk program. So if people are planning on redoing their sidewalks, then the town will pitch in some of the money to assist in the construction of sidewalks, and homeowners can opt to do the work themselves, and then materials are 40% reimbursable by the town. The trail from Lazy Lane to the town line has been a topic of conversation for months now. We're now, the Department of Transportation, unfortunately, has been holding up a lot of these events, as I mentioned in meetings past, but they're expecting a spring 2022 construction for that part of the trail. Lanceville safety improvements, same story. Department of Transportation's holding things up a little, but they're anticipating a late 2021 bid process with a spring 2022 construction. I know that some people are excited about that. So, the pandemic really put a damper on a lot of these projects, but we're hoping in the next year, at the end of this year and early next year, we'll be able to get some construction done. And I'm happy to announce that there is equipment on the site at Spring Street and Queen Street, and so it's coming to fruition. I'm hoping that hopefully by our next meeting, I'll have more to report, but it looks like it's happening. There's heavy equipment on the property, and so we're hoping that it says here that they anticipated the work to begin last Monday, and I don't think it did. I drove by this weekend, but I did see lots of heavy equipment on there, so hopefully this week they'll get rocking on it, and we'll take it from there. Any questions? Anyone? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Mike. Very good. Apple Harvest Festival.
We have a couple updates. First of all, we are very excited to be back in force for this coming up fall. To date, we have 37 returning vendors and 15 new vendors waiting to come in, so that's exciting to hear.
That's good.
We are again looking for residents' input for our festival theme this year, which is a little different. So the information should go up on the website sometime, hopefully this week. So if you're interested in submitting a proposal for the theme, please reach out to either Dave LaPrey or Julia Bardinelli in the Recreation Office. They should be putting information on the website this week. The most exciting news is we confirmed at our meeting last week, the parade is on. So we are a go for the parade. We're excited about that. That's huge because we weren't quite sure with everything happening. And we also are pleased to announce we have our national band set, and that will be set for Saturday, October 9th on the main stage. And the name of this year's national act is a band called Vertical Horizon. They were founded in the early 90s. They're most famous for their #1 single, Everything You Want, which sold over 2 million copies. And it captured the #1 spot on Billboard's Hot 100 and Adult Top 40 chart. So again, we're excited to welcome a national band again this year, as well as proud to say we're able to continue the parade.
Okay, Chris, are you going to do the light show again this year or not?
The light show, unfortunately, is off for this year.
Well,
We had to make a decision between the parade and
Yeah.
fireworks are on,
Yep.
and the parade is on. The national band is on. The one thing we had to, unfortunately.
I understand.
Yeah.
It's just coming out of COVID. I think
Yeah.
you guys are doing a great job. That's
Yeah.
terrific.
Yeah.
Everybody's excited, I'm sure.
Madam Chair, do you want me to sing a couple bars of that tune?
I know. I wrote it down so I could
Look it up.
listen
Yeah.
to it later.
No, Linda, I get no respect.
Oh, that's so funny.
I'd like to hear Mike sing a couple.
I know.
Maybe the band will let you up
Maybe
there.
another time, or we'll get him up on stage.
I'm
with the
excited. I
band.
love that band. I really do.
Good,
Yeah,
good.
they're great.
Okay, sewer committee. I'm sure that's as exciting as
I
the
know.
Apple Harvest Festival committee.
Right.
We
Bill,
have-
any
we have
national
national
acts
No.
at the sewer committee?
We had our on-site tour finally after COVID, and it was pretty impressive. The sewer plant is, my understanding, is operational, and anyone who's been to Rec Park or been to the plant, you can't avoid that there is a smell. And I can tell you that some of the improvements they made, that it's not at all like it used to be. And that may agree with me. They say it has an earthy smell, which I guess when I smelled it, earthy. Well, in a serious note though, I mean, it's a large capital project and it appears to be working. And my understanding is that, and someone please correct me, but Deep is being put on notice. And I guess that means there's going to be some inspection, which is the final act. So it's coming along and hopefully come September, they're going to send out all the invitations.
That's great. Anything else?
That's all I have.
No national band.
National band light show.
No light show. All right.
What
very
was the
good.
lineman bill, right?
Anybody else have any reports on their committees? We're going to move right along and go to the town manager's report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to check, Annette or Jay, do we have them back or no? This is a natural pause in the meeting, but otherwise I'll go.
Matt, can you try to say something?
Can you hear us now? We can hear each other.
We can hear
I'm
them.
not getting them.
They're on. It's just our audio in this room.
You can hear
Put a
me?
Speaker onto this if you want. Let's have it.
Laura, can you hear me?
They're on. I can hear them.
They're on a,
Audio's working on the thing.
So his.
Jay, how about that connection in the computer?
It's on mine too. Well,
While they're doing that, Madam Chair, with your
Yes,
permission,
please.
I'll move forward.
Yep.
This is the Board of Finance minutes. We had a very, very busy meeting, a very productive meeting. Let me start with the first item. We had the public hearing on the bond for $16.9 million for the library. The public hearing was put on. The Board of Finance voted unanimously to send it back to the council favorably, which of course will be part of your public hearing, which you'll have on the 28th of this particular month. The next item I have is the second half of our capital budget for budget reallocation. If you recall at your last meeting, you approved the $1 million, which was the first part of it. This is the second part, which is majorly the revenue side, and that's $640,000. And that goes toward the items that are already set forth in your capital budget.
does anybody have any questions on that item?
The next item is relatively new. This is our third year doing it, but let me go slowly with you. As you know, last year, the Board of Education had approval for carryover monies from the budget that is currently expiring. That particular amount is $1,855,000 and change. What they did at the Board of Finance meetings, they gave the list, which you all have,
Right.
of the capital items and other items that they're going to be using the money on. How this works is the same way it worked 2 years ago when they had the $535,000 carryover money, which is they set forth the projects they're going to be doing. And as each project comes through, it's signed off through the finance office and my office, and the projects get done. So that's for the fiscal year that we're currently in. Next fiscal year, they've asked for and received permission from the Board of Finance to carry over up to 2%, which is what the statutory amount is. We won't know the exact amount until they come to us in September like they did in the previous 2 years. And they're going to be able to give us a number for which, and a rough idea of what the items are going to be, but they usually don't give us the items until the spring like they did this year. So that's also very important. So any questions on that? I know this is relatively new to us. This is our third year with the Board of Education, but as you know, the town has been doing this for years and years through its budget reallocation system. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, Val, why don't you go first?
So, Mark, just a question about the proposed projects. Those are projects that have been they've already put these out there. Excuse me. They didn't just come up with these because there's money.
No,
We're already projects.
yeah,
that
these
have-
projects are the ones that we approved last year for the $1.8 million. That was last
budget.
June is when they asked for the carryover, and then they gave us some of the projects for last September. They're finalizing the projects as the Board of Education voted on these particular projects to use for the 1.8. That's the money, like I said, from the fiscal year last. The money that you're approving to carry over for into next fiscal year is the money from this fiscal year, and that's up to 2%, which is even my math can figure that one out. It's a $100 million budget, so it's probably somewhere around $2 million.
But we're voting on both.
Yes. Yeah. The specifics of the second one will come to you again like this, but
Right.
it won't be until probably this time next year.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Clarification, Madam Chair. Mark, I got the number on the Board of Ed carryover for this current cycle. What was the government one again?
I'm saying
The town government carryover. What are we anticipating it's going to look like?
our carryover.
Yeah.
Well, we do budget reallocation prior to, so ours is about $1.8 million, which is like I said, the 1.1 last meeting and 640 but we don't call that, it's budget reallocation. Nothing's being carried over. We're actually using the money now. We're going to be buying that stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's 600 for the reallocation.
640 this time,
Yep.
and last time you did the 1 million. So if you look in your capital budget,
Yep.
it's about 1.8 million dollars.
Thanks.
Yes.
Madam Chair, thank you. I do have some comments, or requests for follow-up for the town manager through you, Madam Chair. And this was an issue that we spoke about on the council, I guess we call it the council screen a few months
Yeah.
ago. And this circles back to the softball program at the high school. For those who missed the conversation a few months ago, on page 193 of the fiscal year 21-22 budget, there outlines a situation that occurred where the State Department of Education found that the facilities at the softball fields at the high school are not satisfactory. So when I looked at this budget, the non-lapsing fiscal year 20 account, I continued to see athletic facility upgrades. And I said, why isn't the softball on this list? Now, I do thank the town manager for putting $215,000 in this upcoming year's budget, which we all supported, which was a fantastic step in the right direction. But I guess I am getting a little bit impatient, because in the budget, it says that there's a master study December of 2020. I think that this council needs to see that, and we need to, and I know us 9 on this dais have publicly supported this project. We actually don't have a choice, but I think we need to prioritize this in a faster way. We need to see this study, and we need to fund it appropriately. And this dais is going to change in November, but I'm confident that both the local Democratic Party and the local Republican Party will make this a cornerstone of the next few years, because I'm tired of seeing other improvements to our facilities, and we're waiting. I don't know. It's been at least 5 years now. So through you, Madam Chair, I asked the town manager to report back to the council on when we can expect to see the study that's being done.
Madam Chair, if I can,
Go ahead.
I met with Steve Risser, our AD, and the master study is there. I don't know if the town manager is aware of that, but you can sit, I mean, I'm going to go up and sit and go through it.
Good.
So the master study is there. You can, contact Steve,
Mhm.
sit, look through the master study. It's all there as to what's being, what is being proposed, and what they're looking to do going forward. I wholeheartedly agree with you, Mr. Lombardi. It's 40 years late,
Yes.
is the way I look at it. So the 215,000 is great.
Mhm.
It's going to, it's going to bring the softball field a little closer to what it should be, but, Title IX was 1971. And every time additions and, dugouts, lighting, batting cages,
Mhm.
fencing, scoreboard, restroom, anything that's on that baseball field, it should have been, no matter how the money was raised.
Right.
The law said the girls should have had the same comparable.
Right.
So it's, we absolutely need to be doing this. And I think it's really sad that the baseball program has had beautiful facilities, and now their facilities are run down. But they already got to have all those facilities. And the girls have not had any of that. And,
Thing about the mess, we did have a meeting months ago with the superintendent and the AD. I'm not sure I know they have the preliminary one. I'm not sure it's finalized
I
yet, but
don't believe it's the final
yeah, it's not the
plan.
final one, but I do know that, that they're going to get it finalized, and I'll certainly get an update for you, Mr. For the whole
Yes.
council. That's issue number 1. Issue number 2 is the funding part of it. And Obviously, if it's taken as one project, it'll be a referendum number. It's not going to be below a referendum number. So, yeah, I do know there's preliminary studies. I don't believe it's finalized yet, but it will get finalized because the question is that the people are going to be looking at they're not looking at the fields. They're looking at the whole property and saying, okay, what can we do on the whole property? So it isn't as generic as, okay, how are we going to improve the baseball field or how are we going to improve the softball field? It's how we're going to get the best out of the land we have, because I believe we all figure that the land itself isn't going to get any bigger. That's about it for us. There isn't land to buy, and that's about it. So that, I believe, is going to be the finalized part of the study. And then the most important thing is speccing it out, doing the scope, and then getting the money for it. So
Right,
I'll get
and I
an update on
agree with that. But, you know, Mr. Lombardi's raising a good point. It's the whole complex that's being looked at, and there's a lot of issues with the entire complex. There's issues with the tennis courts and the track, the bleachers, you know, the football stadium. All of the back fields have been left and nothing's been done. So it truly isn't just the softball field, but the discrepancy and the fact that we've been in violation of the Civil Rights Act and Title IX and ADA, you know, for a number of years, and many town councils did nothing about it.
Right.
So everybody turned their head and said, you know, it's just the girls out there, let them go out there and do their thing. And they win 19 titles.
Yeah.
So I agree. It's
Because
the
we're not
specs of
changing it.
everything. Pardon?
Better leave it alone.
Oh, it's gonna hopefully stay in the same spot because they don't want to move it.
Just to add a positive note to this, Mr. Cannellan, Mr. Risser, they have worked on it. They've got the resources to do the study. We, the town, have helped out a little bit with $215,000. But the fact of the matter is, I agree with everything that's said here. But the fact of the matter is also we need to, I'll get an update on where we are.
Yeah.
But you have to look at this thing as holistically. You have to look at the whole project and then how are we going to fund it? So
Sure.
I agree with everything that's said here, but I also agree that we are moving in the right direction. We've had a superintendent and an AD and the prior AD, both very, very serious about making this happen. So
Right, and I'll just close with, yeah, we're committed to moving this thing forward. And for me, when I saw $1.8 million and not $1 to the softball field, I said, you know what? Now's a good time. Let's have this conversation. Town manager will do some work for us, and let's keep the conversation going. Even if we're not happy with the timeline presented, let's get the timeline out there so that the public knows and the athletic groups know that we're working on it. So that's all, and I appreciate everyone's patience with this.
that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Mr. Town Manager, were you going to mention a change in staff tonight?
She has one more meeting with us.
Oh, one more.
She has one more. But since you've already let the cat out of the
I'm
bag,
so
Madam Chair,
sorry.
I was going to wait to the last meeting, but I am pretty upset to have to announce, although great for her. To no great surprise, Linda and I have known each other for 30 plus years. She worked for me for 25 years and probably the best thing that happened in my career. But that being said, she is planning on moving to Wisconsin, where her
Where the cheese
beloved
is.
granddaughter is, and she's going to be living in the same neighborhood as her granddaughter. So we all wish, obviously, the administration, Kathy and I have already been depressed over this, but
Me too.
we will try and find people to do what Linda does, but we will never find anybody to replace Linda. That being said, on a personal note, and obviously to notify the council that the 28th will be Linda's last meeting with us. And unless, of course, we can wrangle her to do a couple of streaming meetings for us from Wisconsin. But anyway, that being said,
Get the stuff. to work.
publicly, Linda, I know I did so to the Board of Finance already with you, but thank you for all the years, the 35 plus years you put in with the town of Southington, and you'll be greatly missed.
Sorry, Lena, that request is denied. Sorry. See you next meeting.
So next meeting, I'm not going to say a word about you.
Well,
Gracious.
well, you know how much we appreciate you, Linda, after all these years, and you deserve this wonderful time with your family. Even though Mark's crying every day, but we'll have to put up with it. But thank you so much, Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you.
Let's move on to our town's attorney's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just have one item under my agenda today. This is an item that usually doesn't come in front of you guys.
Oh, no, I'm just,
Okay, sorry. This use item that doesn't come under you, it's a separate agenda item, but on May 20th, 2020, Festival Fun Parks, which is the owner of Lake Compounds, filed a tax appeal against the town of Bristol and the town of Southington in two separate suits, but they kind of work together, obviously, because it's both ownership of Lake Compounds. And basically, we've come to a stipulated agreement after speaking with Bristol Council as well as our tax assessor for the grand list of 2019 to abate some taxes as well as push assessment on this theme ride, which is the Venus Vortex, which was supposed to be on the grand list of 2020, but because of COVID, work on that and completion of that was delayed. So we agreed to push that to the grand list of 2021 because it wasn't operational during that time. And that's something that is in agreement with the town of Bristol as well. So why it's in front of you today is this agreement is under a special statute that's set up for amusement parks in the Connecticut General Statute, which is 12-81P. And that requires that it come in front of you for approval of this. Like I said, this is not something, these agreements usually don't come in front of you guys as a separate item, but that is the only reason why it's coming from you because of that statute requires that.
Great. Anybody have any questions of the town attorney? Sure. Val?
So what if we didn't agree? Is this already signed in a stipulation of the court?
No, it isn't right now. This has to pass through you guys first to be able to go through there.
I mean, is this something that we would typically, is it something we would typically agree to? Like, do we have any choice?
Usually these kind of legal settlements don't come in front of you guys. But this one, because it's under a separate amusement park statute that's set up only actually for any amusement parks that are over 200 acres, that have been run continuously for 100 years, and that are considered historic, the General Assembly decided to make a public act in 1994 just to carve out this little niche. So it was just, to be honest with you, a legal strategy between us and the Bristol Council to put it under this statute come before you.
Yeah, come on. Paul? Yeah.
Sorry.
So just for clarification, Jeremy, so is the reason that the tax abatement is occurring is because there was equipment that was going to be taxed and installed earlier that wasn't installed? And because of COVID delaying that installation, they've asked for relief on that? Can you just give a little bit more detail on the why?
That's one part of it. That is one of the two parts of it. The other one is basically we get a lot of tax assessment appeals that come through. And basically the rationale for this one is that some of the equipment was depreciated. Amusement equipment depreciates sometimes differently than regular equipment because of just the nature of it. So they challenged our assessment of it. And we came to this settlement with them, which we thought was a fair agreement.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, Chris?
I was going to ask very similar to Paul. So, I mean, that's what I heard too, Paul. I thought what you're saying, Jeremy, is that this is simply, they're asking for a delay due to COVID, the fact that it wasn't on the tax roll at a certain date. That's kind of what I believe too, is it?
We
Could
were
you
going to
just
put it
clarify?
on the 2020 tax roll initially because it was supposed to be completed. Most of it was up, but it wasn't operational due to delays because of COVID. So we really weren't going to tax something that wasn't operational.
Right. So it sounds pretty reasonable to me is my point. And I think that's what Paul was saying too.
Yes.
It sounds like they're asking for us to consider delaying it because they couldn't do what they needed to do due to COVID restrictions.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Attorney Taylor, so that ride didn't run last summer at all?
No, it didn't.
Still,
Just
it's
that
never
bit.
assembled. I mean, parts of it
Never.
is not
Yeah.
even.
I kind of looked it up today. It looks amazing what it's going to be,
Right.
but it's this giant
For you,
Venus flytrap water slide or something.
They're very excited to get it going. Paul and I were at the 175th anniversary a couple weeks ago, and they're excited to get it going, but it's still not operational yet.
Do you have a
Yes.
Do you think the council needs to take a trip there to test out? No, my question is, to Councilman Palmieri's comment, that we're not just abating it because of COVID, we're abating it because there was a statute put in place by the state. That's why we're able to do this.
Yes.
There's nothing really, that, just because we want to do it. I think that's important to put out there. And I may have missed it, so I apologize, but how long does this go into the future? How long of an
No,
abatement
this is just
this?
for the 2019 grand list of personal property.
Just
This
that
has
one
nothing to
year?
do with real estate,
Okay.
assessments or anything like
And
that.
is there a dollar amount associated with this approval?
There is this, ends up being $25,750.
And that's, I'll just reiterate, that's just a one-time abatement.
That's the one-time abatement.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
So this is the 2020 case, 2019 grand list. There's a 2021 case, which I not asked for comment on, but that's stiff for that case. That case, the 2021 case is not impacted by this.
No, not at all.
So how does that work? I guess is what I was wondering. So you have a business that's in two towns. I know if you have a piece of real property that's in two towns, it's easy to figure out. And more kind of just informational. So what if they want to park their trucks on the Sullyton side because the taxes are lower? Can they game anything like that, or is it where your address is? Like,
To be honest, Bill, I'd probably have to talk to the tax assessor about that.
because it seems like the 2021 case kind of seems like that entire way they're being taxed is wrong. I was just curious, and
I could just say there are several, that's the only large major one. I could say from past experience that the two assessors work together. Science and Bristol work very closely together when it comes to lake compounds, whether it be the health district or whether it be the assessor's office. So they come to agreements that are equitable to both towns.
it's interesting. I didn't know.
Madam Chair, I just want to remind everyone, I'm sure everyone knows that Lake Compounds is a good neighbor for Southington and generates a lot of revenue for the town because a lot of people come through. And they stay at our hotels and they eat at our restaurants and they shop at our convenience stores and our stores. So
I just have one more question. Are we by any means setting a precedent with this abatement?
No, we always take these on a year-to-year basis. So that's why we wanted to make sure in this stipulation, this is only for the 2019 grand list. If they want to appeal next year's or something else like that, obviously they're free to do it just as any other businesses.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else?
Ready, I think we may be ready.
Are we ready to roll?
business.
Okay, yeah, okay, well, let's do that then. Let's hear the presentation. I know you're waiting so patiently to make a comment,
She's
but
been dying for the presentation on energy. That's
yeah, but let's get through this presentation and then we'll be glad to open it up for you.
Okay, Matt, you're on.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
There we go.
Matt never sounded so good.
I don't think there's anything more uniquely frustrating for listeners than waiting for audio to kick in. So I thank you all for being very patient. And unfortunately, you missed me singing a few bars of a song earlier. So you're lost. So I'm very conscious of time. I appreciate I was already asked to move quickly and now we have lost some time. So I'm going to go through it. I think most of the folks that had their document as a pre-read. So I'll touch on the key points and that way I'll stick to the request to be efficient on time. So let's start with the electric. You're going to hear a common theme, which is over the last 14 months, as Mark said, we've worked very closely with the town, had great support from the town manager and the town engineer to systematically look at a lot of the structural kind of cost basis you've got in the town and make sure that we were timing the market correctly and being thoughtful about keeping the town out of the risk. So in terms of the electric, in terms of the usage, I had a good discussion with Jerry over the Board of Education at this. I think the patterns and usage changes are very much driven by the pandemic. So where the town has had reductions, where you've had certain building closures or folks work from home, in the Board of Education in particular, you've had very, very high cycling of the air and conditioning of the building. So when Shuri and I looked at it, it was, I think in September and October alone, there was 30% more usage just in those 2 months, because the facilities team there were doing a fantastic job keeping constant airflow, air intake, and conditioning the building. So the usage, in any given year would look very abnormal, but given the context of the building usage and the air circulation, nothing stands out there to us. In terms of the procurement, we had very good support and partnership with, again, the town manager and the finance team and the town engineer to look at the cost. We went through a competitive aggregate auction a number of times, and in April 2020, which, if you cast your mind back, right, was about a month or so into, let's call it the lockdown period of COVID, we were able to secure, frankly, some very, vast discounts on the electric. So the town and the Board of Education received about an 18% reduction. The water.
Excuse me just a second. Could you speak up a little bit? It's kind of muffled. Your sound is.
I think
kind
when
of-
he turns his head, Madam Chair, we're not getting everything. So I think he
Yeah,
has to talk
maybe-
into the
If
laptop.
you could talk more into
Yeah.
your laptop. And are you planning on sharing your presentation on the screen?
I can do that if that helps. I apologize. I thought you guys had it in advance. 1 second, please.
You do have it in advance, but the public also needs to see.
Got it. Did that come through?
Thank you.
Okay, great. So on the second slide, second table on that slide, you can see the reductions that I've mentioned there. The other aspect of this that's good is that and this comes into relevance as we saw in February in, up and down the West Coast with the bad weather, making sure the counterparty you're in a deal with is quite key. So the deals are split between ENGIE. The majority owner of ENGIE is the French government. They're a global 500 energy company. And then the other provider is Direct Energy. They were recently acquired by NRG, which is a Fortune 500 company, and that acquisition price was, I think, 3.4 billion. So they're very financially beneficial rates. And then just as importantly, the counterparties that have to honor those rates have high credit counterparty worthiness. That's the electric. I'll keep going in the interest of time as requested. In terms of natural gas, as I just mentioned, what we had in January through March in particular of the winter just gone was one of the coldest winters we've had on recent records. If we compare seasonal normal temperatures between the period of 1980 and 2010, that period was 11 degrees colder than average. That meant any building that had kind of thermal, particularly kind of public heating requirements, had very high usage. And so again, with these with that context, given what we've seen in the market, there is no cause for alarm on that natural gas usage based on our discussions we've had with some of the town and board folks. It's all weather driven, nothing out of kilter there. Historically, the town and the other buying entities have taken their natural gas supply directly from a utility default service. The competitive market has not offered a discount. Given some of the run up we've seen recently in the market, we're going to go ahead and run what I think will be the third market test in about 3 years to see if there are savings to be had, and we'll circle back again on that. In terms of fuel supply, believe it or not, in the last 14 months, we've done 2 procurements. So the first one, again, was April 20. Thinking back, again, that was about 1 month into the kind of lockdown portion of the pandemic. And this is where we saw crude oil, Brent, really kind of come down to pretty much historic lows. And in some kind of market spot prices, they even went negative at one point. That meant when we locked that down, we were very opportunistic, to put it bluntly, and those rate reductions were about a third reduction. Since then, we've seen, and we expected this, and we had good, again, good partnership with the town here. The decision was made because of the risk and market liquidity changes that we would lock down the next round 2 years. Although obviously that was a big increase from that historic low. As you can see from this benchmark, with pump prices now at a 7-year high and Brent crude today hitting I think it's a 3-year high, the town pricing for for fuels is hit very well. To put it in perspective, the new pricing on 89 octane is just over $2. The kind of public, price at the pumps is north of $3. So again, despite that kind of, contract to contract increase, because of that timing difference when we procured the last one and what's happened to the market since, the town is in a very good, fixed rate there. And the counterparty there is the same, local provider that's been providing the town for about 5 or 6 years. As the fuel supply update. Switch over to the solar performance. There are currently 5 of the Board of Education properties that are physically hosting solar. This solar generates electricity on a non-dispatchable basis, which means when the sun shines and there isn't cloud cover, the solar panels will produce kWh. If the school has a load need, a demand for it, it will use it itself. If not, it gets net metered and sold back to the grid as an offset to the next round of kilowatt hours that come after net metering. So far, in terms of what was produced in the last review versus now, because of the particularly because of the weather, but frankly because of just system maturity, we've seen very positive avoided costs. So you can see most of these are strong 5-figure avoided cost. More than the business case suggested at the time. So good, good production from the school's assets there. In terms of other assets or other investments, you guys will recall that a number of years ago, you had a contract for an EPC, an energy performance contract, where the town, raised money by way of loan note and paid for, I think they had a contract price just north of $13 million. For a number of items that were ECMs or energy conservation measures. This is things like changing the street lights out to LEDs, right through to doing upgrades of the heating and ventilation systems in certain buildings. The contract had a guaranteed savings, and each year Noresco and your owner's rep ECG produces a report that they share with us as your energy consultant for our review. The structure and let us have a look at what it's done in terms of the kilowatt hour as well as the financial savings. Current year's report, which is the performance year through July 20, is on screen, and it is hit exactly within 0.1% of the guaranteed savings, which means that in the period through July 2020, there's already been a recoup of $3.9 million. The next report from them will be available in around October or November coming up this calendar year. Again, conscious of time, just going to carry on moving through. So the other kind of long-standing project the town has is a waste to power conversion opportunity. So the town did not pay for the capital for this. They don't own the project, but it is what's called a beneficial account, which means that the grid matches up the kilowatt hours produced that's left over from that net export and financially matches it to the town, and then the town is a contractual buyer for a certain amount of that credit. Historically, this is provided anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 worth of financial credits net to the town every year. The last year it was much less material, so it's less than $5K. We have followed up and had discussions with the production host as to what the difference is, and it's really 2 things. Again, in the interest of time, I'll keep it brief. The first thing is that in terms of the food to waste, waste to energy plant. A lot of the incoming waste is from commercial or educational facilities, so local restaurants, local universities and colleges, and the food waste that they've had in terms of their raw material to make their energy has declined over that period, anywhere from about a third, and that's really can hit their ability to produce energy. Second of all, the site itself has higher electric demands, which means it's got less net to export out. So there's been a high, quite a large decline in the amount of credits that have come out to the town's benefit. Now, as a follow-up to that, the host and the owner is looking into other kind of technologies or other ways it can expand that and make sure there is more consistent production. And they will be intending on making a proposal to the town through the energy consultants ourselves in the coming months to see if there is a willingness to kind of look at that. We'll look at that in regard to the contractual rights you guys have at that time. as well as the financial commitments to see if any expansion they do is of interest to you. So that one a little bit disappointing and some context, but we want to make sure that it's a one-off and nothing more than that. Again, conscious of time, just moving right along. The other large project that the town have done in the last year or two was to bring on a fuel cell. So a fuel cell is a non-combustion technology. So unlike say for example, a car engine that burns and combusts an input fuel, in this case natural gas, to produce energy, it has more of a chemical reaction. That means there's a huge amount of efficiency there in terms of the types of waste, greenhouse gases, and smog-causing gases that come out. So it's far fewer, what are called NOx and SOx emissions. And frankly, it's been a good financial business case for the town. So yes, it's the right thing to have done environmentally and gets you much more stable power at site without having to worry about grid interruptions. But the financial case has been very, very strong. We've created some indicative net avoided aspects. It looks to be about 10% better than the initial business case was. We're awaiting feedback from the provider Bloom to verify our numbers and assumptions in terms of that gas consumption and gas usage. But so far, in terms of that, the first, call it, half a year of performance, the fuel cell has come online, producing very well. So congratulations to the folks involved in that. And then lastly, in terms of other aspects, as I mentioned earlier on in the call, we will be looking for I think the third time to look at if there are market fixed rates on natural gas that could save, that could or could be likely to save the town money versus buying the default rate. On the last 2 or 3 looks, it hasn't proven to be worthwhile. That said, as we've all seen, there's been a huge amount of volatility in commodities and raw input costs, and natural gas is not an exception. So it means in the last few years where we've had a historically pushing down of commodities, particularly driven by shale and some of the other kind of natural phenomena that's happening in terms of extraction in the US, has benefited all markets. Now with a lot of speculation and then belief that demand and weather patterns will cause those prices to go up, it's time for us to look again. Obviously, the town won't have a deal locked in on their behalf. We'll do the findings and present them through to the town manager and their team and make a decision from that. The other aspect is very broadly that there are a number of other projects. So with the state of Connecticut pushing what it calls the renewable portfolio standard, up each year, which is the amount of generation that needs to be from renewable sources. Like some of the projects that the town has already done, has been a leader on, there are more opportunities that the town gets invited to. We continue to review these very, very closely with the team to see if they make any sense. Before the next annual update, we think there's likely to be a project that would look for approval if the economics pass muster and it independently gets the approvals it requires. We'll know more by then. And then lastly, we understand and are continually challenged by the town, which is the right thing to do around each time there is a new building commissioned, we should continue to look at, as we have done in the past, whether new technologies, especially solar, can make financial sense. We continue with default and delivery rates continue to go up. They do. When we benchmark the rates that the town is paying against the EIA averages for commercial and industrial, you guys continue to benchmark well below those commercial and industrial averages. But if we can push that into a more secure or more green production amount and maintain those economics, then that's a good thing. So we will continue to look at that. So that's it. I appreciate that that was a very quick canter through 10 slides of lots of information. Hopefully there was an opportunity for council and public review of the content. If you are open to having us take questions now, we can do. If you would prefer questions follow up to us in writing, then we can certainly do that as well.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Does anyone have any questions on the presentation at all? One of the things I think which is very important in all of this is that we as a community need to stay abreast on what's going on, and hopefully we don't have to wait so long. So perhaps late in the fall we might get an update, and I think that would be really important, and we continue to do it perhaps every 6 months rather than letting it go for any longer than that, so we can keep an eye on things. I thank you very much. Okay, go ahead, Tom.
One quick comment question. Thank you for the presentation. But so overall, it seems like the town is doing a pretty good job on its energy savings and usage, and how are we comparing to other municipalities that you have as a customer?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yes, overall the town is doing a very good job managing the budget, and most municipalities or even larger towns, and it's very public, so we can talk about this, right? Alberia works with the government of DC, for example. It's almost always the same pecking order, which is, number one, the people work with, their obligation is to make sure the cost base is minimized as much as possible. Second of all, it's to reduce and mitigate risk as much as possible to ensure there are no kind of financial or other shocks to it. Thirdly, I think increasingly we're hearing a much more ESG kind of environmental, social kind of aspect of what we do, and therefore having energy generated close to the demand source, as well as having more green energy comes more key. As I mentioned, Connecticut has I'd say probably a second quartile, not quite first quartile, view to RPS, which is at the moment, including all production types, about 30% of the energy that the town uses, must be green. It's already does that through its supply contract, and then the town is going over, above and beyond in terms of supporting, localized projects, being the on-site solar, as well as the beneficial accounts for fuel cells and waste to power. So in that aspect, you're above above the state mandates by quite a long way, and the state is already, I'd say, in the second quartile. It's not as aggressive as say Rhode Island or DC or Maryland or California, which have 100% goals by a date certain, but it's certainly up there. So I'd say in terms of the larger as well as smaller organizations we work with that have those similar kind of pecking order of needs, right? Kind of budget, risk, green. I think you guys benchmark very, very well. And
Well, thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Can we turn the lights on? We're going to move on. Thank you so much.
Thanks, ma'am.
And take care. We'll talk to you soon. Okay, let's move on, please. Let's invite the public. You've been very patient, and I appreciate that so much. But please come to the podium. You'll have 5 minutes to speak to the council, and we promise we will listen. Please state your name and address. You must be a Southington resident. And please come up. Sure.
At the pool party last?
I just received an email.
Just,
It was email communication.
oh, email.
The pool
I thought
party?
you had gone on
I
site.
wasn't, no, I was.
don't get invited to the pool party.
Chris,
After we
Chris,
go on the
Well, the
roller
neighbors
coaster.
were all there at the pool party, and I was gonna say, if he was there and he was talking with all the neighbors, he should have come and talked to me, too, right? You know,
They
transparency.
emailed the council.
What?
They emailed the full council today. and
Okay,
so I was just
wonderful.
responding to that communication.
Wonderful. I was hoping he would be here tonight, because I believe in conversation where we all talk,
Mhm.
instead of this go behind.
Your
the
name and
back
address,
thing.
please, ma'am. I'm sorry. Name and address.
I'm sorry, I'm Sandra Janiga. This is my husband, Robert Janiga. I'm retired. He is a school teacher at Wilcox Technical School in Meriden, so I'm shocked he's here for support because he coaches, so you know what that's like. But we live on 33 Farmingberry Drive, Marion, Connecticut. And I have written before. I didn't know there was an issue. Nobody said anything to me until Animal Control. Josh Carabin came to visit. So then I found out from a neighbor that Mr. Rinaldi sent letters to everybody in the neighborhood to make this a big issue. So that was a shock to me because I never received a copy of the letter. If I had a problem with a neighbor, how I handle it, I would go over and say, hey, listen, this is an issue. Can we talk about it? That never occurred. So when Mr. Carabin said, do you know what this is about? I says, is it because my cats are outside? Do you need to see rabies or whatever? I didn't know. So I would like to respond to Mr. Rinaldi and his concerns about bears in the Farmingberry Drive area. And I want to also provide some education on the matter. According to Wide Open Spaces, there are 25 fatal black bear attacks have occurred between 1997 and 2017 in North America. Not just the United States, but that includes Canada. According to the NPS, the chances of being injured by a bear are about 1 in 2.1 million. Let's compare that to Mr. Rinaldi and his backyard swimming pool pastime. U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission states that 390 deaths a year on average are attributed to drowning in residential swimming pools and spas, because we need a comparison of what bears are versus other things that we're dealing with. That is 1.25 deaths per year, 1 death per year by bears versus residential swimming pool deaths of 1 per day in the United States. Should we ban all swimming pools because it's clear they are more dangerous than bears? I would hope not. Let's look into this even a little bit more. Some neighbors have dogs in the Farmingberry neighborhood. I don't, but some do. Typically, between 30 and 50 people in the U.S. die from dog bites each year. Around 4.5 million Americans are bitten by dogs every year versus on average of 32 bear attacks in the U.S. per year. As you can see, dogs are much more dangerous. I love dogs, but the facts are the facts. Should we eliminate all dogs from neighborhoods? Of course not. Lastly, there are humans. They are 6 more times likely to kill each other than the average mammal. Hard to believe, but it's true. Fortunately, Friends for Animals in 2019 stated there have been no human killings from black bears in Connecticut. That's a real good thing. At that time, hunting black bears for sport in the state was being considered to reduce the population. From my perspective, happily, that legislation failed to pass. I noticed that Mr. Rinaldi in a September 2020 town council meeting did not object when it was suggested by a town council member to think about having a bear hunting season again. The neighbors of Farmingberry Drive have a great option of improving their property values by putting up a fence. Hence, no more bear problems, and everyone lives in harmonies with the bears at that point. The Janigas have established a line of 15 7-foot green giant hemlocks along Mr. Rinaldi's and the Janigas property line for privacy. Unfortunately, constant photos of Sandra Janiga and her family are still being taken in their yard. And when I say constantly, it's daily. In my garage, photos are being taken. They're on their property, but they're being taken. My daughter, sunbathing in our yard, photos are being taken. Are Rinaldi's trying to intimidate the Janigas? How would Mr. Rinaldi and his family feel if constant photos of them at their pool were taken on a regular basis by a neighbor? It may be currently legal to do, but it's creepy, right? Sometimes to get perspective, you need to put the shoe on the other foot. The problem of constant photo taking is going to be addressed in a different forum if it continues. Mr. and Mrs. Rinaldi take photos of the bear when they are outside, and they never run away in fright. Isn't that ironic? Most people who fear for their lives don't react in that manner. They run in the house and lock the door. If I'm frightened of something, that's what I would do. A commonplace. This is the thing that's important. The Rinaldis may want to educate themselves on where bears from Woolkit and Southington are relocated if they're captured. This is important because a common place is the reservoir across from our street. They are relocated there. Okay? That's a fact. You can check into that. Woolkit does it, and so does Southington.
Sandra, I'm going to let you continue on for just a bit because you're right in the middle of it. I think it's very important since there was a question about referring this for an ordinance. So I'm going to let you go on. Is that all right with everybody? I think it's important.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So my husband knows someone in animal control in Meriden, and they relocate to Broad Brook Reservoir. They do the same thing. These are common practices in all states because the habitat is great for bears. Our area is great for bears, plain and simple. The Town Council of Southington is walking on a slippery slope. If they start banning people from favorite pastimes like bird feeding, which is enjoyed by over 55 million people in the U.S., yes, Mr. Rinaldi, because I know you'll look at this, 55 million people like me do feed and watch the birds. I'm not alone in this. But if the town council eliminates feeding the birds in the spring and summer, you deprive people of seeing northern orioles, rose-breasted grosbeaks, catbirds, and the goldfinch in full color, among many other birds. How would Mr. Rinaldi like being restricted to using his pool only in the winter months? I have reduced my number of feeders and now bring the feeders in each night. Obviously, there is no compromise on Mr. Rinaldi's behalf, which reflects to me that there is something personal in nature here, and it's not about bears. I've been feeding the wild birds for 21 years on this property, and it has never been an issue, and now it is. So something's going on, but I don't know what it is because we have had no communication at all. Did you know that a single bear eats 13 to 18 pounds of food a day? Literally, if I was supporting the bears, I would be going broke. If Southington bans bird feeding, property rights will be whittled away once again. How do we start determining what hobby is more important? What happens if a golf ball hits a window of a home on a golf course? Do we shut the golf course down because the homeowner is unhappy? We have to all learn to live together. It starts to become political at that point, and outcomes are determined by who's in power at that time. Don't we have enough of that already? Why aren't we communicating and why aren't we trying to get along? But it's just not happening. Everything is being done behind my back. And just for the record, my property, nobody can see in my backyard besides Mr. Rinaldi. So everybody else who says anything about my backyard, there's no way they could know unless they're trespassing. Woods are behind my whole property line. So you have to take this whole thing in perspective. I still talk to all my neighbors, but not one has come to me to say anything. And I think they're afraid of intimidation. And that's kind of sad that we can't all work through this together. But I mean, the bears are going to be there. When we retire to move to South Carolina, guess what? They're still going to be there. And I'm glad you brought up the ordinances, because Canton, Simsbury, some of the other towns have tried to do this and they stopped bird feeding. Guess what? The bears are still there. It hasn't changed a single thing, which is unfortunate. You know, so should I have used, I'm being honest here, should I have used proper, better feeding habits? Probably, but I talked with Josh. He told me and gave me some suggestions, things to do, and I did them, but it's still not satisfactory. And I can be honest with you, you can talk to the last, because he calls animal control on me all the time. Called Dave, he's called everybody. So you can talk to the last, it wasn't Josh, it was a young lady who came. And she said, I came home from Costco, I put my bird feeders out. She was at my door within 10 minutes. And I says, that's interesting. I just put my bird feeders out, so I'm being watched. And she says, well, can I see them? And I said, yeah. And she goes, this is fine. I says, but let me tell you why I feed the birds. I says, I get northern orioles only in the month of May. Sure enough, we're standing there and here comes in 4 orioles and the beautiful color that they have. This isn't for everybody, but it's my passion. I even trained at Cornell University. And if you remember Old Evergreen Nursery, I know it's closed now. I did wild bird feeding seminars on talking about the birds there, and we had 150 people. I used to do places like Vinnie's Garden, and I would talk to 1,000. So this isn't something that's a tit for tat. This is something that I've done my whole life since I was 3 years old.
Sandra, I'm going to stop you
Sure,
here, but
I'm done.
thank you so much. I know there's another perspective on this
I
situation.
wish they were here to talk about it.
Well, and you and I have spoken before, and I've spoken to Josh. And so, from last year.
Yes.
So, I wanted just to give you an opportunity so that, because we have all of this stuff written, Mr. Rinaldi has given a very thorough informational
I'd
kind of
like
stuff.
a copy of that, please.
Yeah, of course, we're going to submit it right to the record. Kathy, we'll make sure that you get copies of everything, and we'll put it right in the minutes, okay?
Because there's
Thank
always
you.
2 sides to every story. and I get that, you know what I mean? But I wish we could just all be here
Okay.
and kind of like hash it out, but that's just.
We
not gonna
appreciate your time and waiting. I know tonight was a long meeting, and you've got to teach in the morning, so thank you. Yes, Paul?
If I may, I think I was the one who might have made the suggestion about bear hunting, the population in the past. I mean, it is population control is population management is something that is, regularly done by states and municipalities all over the United States.
I'm not against hunting. My
Yeah,
brother wasn't.
That wasn't the point, but my point was, I, for one, will not support an ordinance that restricts people from feeding birds, period. I mean, people have a right to use their property, and, you're living in a rural area. I understand what you're saying about feeding the birds. It sounds like you're going above and beyond to, to try to make good neighbors. So I applaud you for doing that and listening to some of the feedback from the neighbors and and the town who have come out and offered some guidance. So thank you for that. But I have I don't see the need for an ordinance at this time, Madam Chair. to be
Okay,
honest
thank
with
you. All right, we're not going to discuss this right now because we have other people wanting to make comments. So is there anyone else that would like to speak to us? No. How about online, on WebEx? Is there anyone who wishes to speak to us? If you do, Jay will bring you in. For anyone?
Yeah, I'd like to speak.
Okay, could you identify yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Tom Catricala. I live at 204 Stonegate Road. I'm calling regarding the town attorney's report regarding the option to abate property taxes. I read this on the agenda and I did have an inkling it was related to lake compounds. And I'm glad one of the town council members brought up that Southington lake compounds is a huge boon to Southington. Not only that, they make a lot of money. They are owned by a giant corporation that owns 40 other amusement parks. And reading this on the agenda, what I immediately thought was this sounds like a giant corporation trying to avoid taxes. I appreciate the town attorney's explanation regarding you guys came to a decision. I'd love to know how you guys came to that decision. It seems like there were a lot of moving parts. And I'll totally honest, a lot of that will probably go over my head. But the way I see it is Lake Compounds owns the property regardless of whether or not they were able to make a profit off of it this past year. If they own the property, they should be paying the property taxes. Again, this is a multi-million-dollar company. They own a ton of property. My concern, as other town council members brought up, that this could become a habit. And my greater concern is that the tax abatement will be offset by the rest of the taxpayers in Southington. So again, I appreciate the town attorney's explanation. It did answer a lot of my questions, but just caution against turning this into a habit because that cost will inevitably be transferred onto the taxpayers because I don't think people are going to be looking at raising taxes on Southington. And just one more point, Southington isn't going anywhere. I would recommend Lake Compounds is not going anywhere. I would recommend the town of Southington work with the town of Bristol to get this giant company to pay their taxes. I know they've had a history of avoiding taxes. I know in the late 90s. So please work with them to get them to pay their fair share. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on the computer calls? Anyone else? Could you just double check, Jay, and make sure there's nobody trying to get on?
See anybody?
No? Okay. We'll be moving right on. Thank you so much, everyone who spoke tonight. Let's get right into old business. Item A, action on the report of the Board of Finance.
Madam Chair, I'll
So
make,
move, Madam Chair.
Okay, wait, Mike had started to say
That's
something,
okay.
Michael?
just motion to approve it.
Motion to approve it.
And
Follow.
second, very
I'll
good.
second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
DiPaolo,
Yes.
Dezak,
Yes.
Lombardi,
Yes.
Morelli,
Yes.
Palmieri,
Yes.
Pulis,
Yes.
Chaplinsky.
Yes.
Del Santo,
Yes.
Triano.
Yes. Item B, action on the municipal option to abate the property tax for lake compounds. And it has to do with that one particular ride or one particular item, right? Is it from 2019?
No, it's two distinct things. One is the Venus Vortex that's just going to be pushed from 2020 to 2021. and then the abatement for the 2019 of that 25,750. And just want to make a point that it's personal property. This has nothing to do with real estate taxes.
Okay, that's important.
They have to
yeah.
be voted on separately, Mr. Taylor, or no?
No, they're all part.
I'll make a
Okay.
motion, Madam Chair, to approve.
So we have a motion to approve. Is there a second? Somebody said it. I'm sorry. Jim? Okay. Is there any discussion on this?
Just a quick,
Okay.
so it doesn't sound like that this is something that they, meaning Lake Compounds, does often. I mean, is this?
I don't, to be honest with you, I don't know the history of it, as I've only been the town attorney for 2 years.
I'm just thinking other councilmen, like, is
I
this
don't
something
remember
that
them ever
comes up?
coming here for an abatement.
You know, because I know there was some
Yeah, the
concern.
the
about-
gentleman mentioned in the 90s, if you remember correctly, I was involved a little bit back then, and there was a major issue. They was going to close. So Bristol and Southington worked very closely with Lake Compounds to keep it alive. It was owned by Hershey Park, I believe, at
Right,
the
it
time.
wasn't this company.
And so what happened was, yes, there was a large forgiveness of taxes both on Southington and Bristol's part. But in my humble opinion, the recommendations we gave the council back then were actually quite good, because I understand it did not bode well, because we did forgive a bunch of taxes, but on the other hand, it's still operating. So
They were able to sell it.
so I was involved in that. That was back in the early 90s.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Yeah. go
Thank
ahead.
you, Madam Chair. And I just want to reiterate that the tax abatement statute is a state statute that was sent to us, Section 1281. So we are not making this up. I mentioned it earlier, but we are not bringing this up, and we are not initiating it. This is just something that Lake Compounds found in the statute, and whatever avenue it went, it ended up as a court case, and we're voting on it this evening. So
Very good.
the public's, the individual's comments were well taken, but I think we did address a lot of those issues.
Very good. Anybody else? I'm sorry, go ahead, Jim.
I think it's a very fair.
Madam Clerk, I'm going to ask for a voice vote on this because it involves money.
DiPaolo,
Yes,
Dedzek,
Yes.
Lombardi,
Yes.
Morelli,
Yes.
Palmieri,
Yes.
Pulis,
Yes.
Chaplinsky,
Yes.
Del Santo,
Yes.
Triano.
Yes. Very good. Thank you, everybody. Passes unanimously. New business tax refunds. Val, would you like to do the honors tonight?
yes, Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we accept or approve the tax refunds that are outlined in our packet.
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion on these? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously this evening. Thank you. I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed can stay. Thank you, everybody. Good meeting. Thank you,
Chairman, I
everyone.
do believe, thanks to both Paul and Jay, I know it was a little bit shaky, but I believe all those issues are behind us now. So we'll continue this way for the public hearing next meeting with your permission.
Yes,
Okay.
thank